It is Monday, March 8th, and I'm calling the Anacortes City Council meeting to order. Ms. Hunt, would you take the roll?
Mr. Carter,
Present.
Mr. Young,
Here.
Mr. Walters,
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath,
Here.
Ms. Moulton,
Here.
Mr. McDougall,
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, if you're, yes, I was just gonna say, if you're not presenting, turn off your screen, but everyone has. So welcome, and the first item tonight is item 2 under announcements and committee reports. And it's my COVID-19 update for this week. At Island Hospital, they've tested 12,886 people total. We've had 267 positive cases and 44 people hospitalized, and we've had 0 fatalities. To date, we've administered 3,299 vaccines, and scheduling is now open for online vaccine appointments for single dose Johnson & Johnson vaccines, and they're available for March 10th, 11th, and 12th. So if you know of someone that needs to get a vaccine, please have them look into that. In Skagit County, as of yesterday, we'd had 4,214 positive cases, 60 deaths, 269 people hospitalized. And in the 98221 area code, we've had 383 actual cases. The total number of vaccines administered in Skagit County by a registered vaccine provider has been 33,897 people to date have received a vaccine. COVID-19 testing site at Skagit County Fairgrounds will close permanently after this coming Saturday, March 13th. The drive-through testing site will operate this Tuesday and Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Appointments can be made at Skagit County Health Department online. In Washington State, we've had 347,000 cases, and we've had 5,108 deaths. Governor Inslee announced tentative dates for advancing the next phases of the COVID-19 vaccine eligibility, with the state projected to begin phase 1B2 on March 22nd, and with more than 1.7 million vaccines have been given out in our state in the last 3 months. The current eligibility for vaccines in phase 1A and 1B1 is for healthcare workers and first responders, anyone who lives and works in a long-term care facility, anyone over the age of 65, anyone 50 or over living in a multi-generational household, and as of just a few days ago, teachers and staff for pre-K through K through 12 schools, and workers in childcare and daycare settings. That was in a new edition. In the United States, we've had a little over 29 million cases. We've had 525,000 deaths. And worldwide, we've had 117 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. And that includes the people that died, and that's 2.6 million deaths reported to us by the World Health Organization. And that's my COVID update for tonight. Are there any questions?
Mayor Gear,
Yes, Mr. Young.
if you won't mind, I'd like to add just a little bit to that report.
Go ahead.
You know, for the last couple of weeks, I think there's been reporting that the hospital for a while had not received any vaccination. And that was quite difficult, particularly given the demographics of where we are right now, but it was also unpredictable for the hospital. And what I wanted to say was that recently they got an allocation, and I will say that that came at the tail end of a Herculean effort by so many wonderful people rallying to try to make it happen. Charles Hall called myself. Of course, Mayor Gear, you were in the middle of that, but we reached out to Representative Deborah Luckenough, Representative Rambo, Senator Lovett's office, and within 1 hour of truly reaching out, we had a meeting all set up with all of the stakeholders, and we pushed hard. And fortunately, the governor's office was listening. They heard, and then the Department of Health heard. And so we were lucky to get some doses here in Anacortes for Island Hospital. And I just wanted to commend not only our representatives for hearing us and rallying with us, but also the leadership at Island Hospital in Charles Hall as the CEO, and also Elise Cutter. They did a tremendous effort of bird dogging this thing all the way through. And so I'm thankful for all of the leadership, city council as well, but just rallying to send the message out that Island wasn't getting any vaccine, let alone hoping for some. And so that all changed. And it, like I like to say, it takes a village. And I wanted to say thank you to not only you, but all of those that work toward making that come about. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. And I will add, council, within 24 hours of our meeting last week, we sent a letter from the city that was also co-signed by all the port commissioners and directors. So that kind of coincided with Anthony's good work, and we had success. So it takes a village, as he said. So thank you for that. And now we're going to move on to item 2B. It's our Port City Liaison Committee report. And who would like to do that?
Yeah, Mayor Gear, I'd be happy to do that. And one other note, this is kind of a unique forum to do it, but I was made aware today that, for example, Island Drug, who has had some of the first vaccines, they now have a sign up on their website. If you're within 20 minutes, you can sign up in case there's extra doses at the end of the day, and it's for whomever can make it. So they will send out a text message if you respond, and you're within 20 minutes of one of those pharmacies. You can get those extra doses. So I, for the general public, I think that that's really important to know that all of the different sites that are administering this vaccine are changing on a daily basis. So I know that I went in and signed up in case, so that no vaccine goes to waste. So I would encourage anyone else who may not qualify for those initial groups to take a look at that.
Yeah.
Now, moving on to the Port City Liaison meeting, it was Councilmember Young, Councilmember Carter, and myself, and Mayor Gear on March 2nd. We had a pretty quick agenda. I think you hit on the COVID issues and the fact that the port was a wonderful partner to sign on that letter also. They've been talking about the boat and yacht show that typically happens in mid-May. Last year, it was all online and virtual. They are working with the state, the county, and the city to see if there's a way to have kind of a modified, more small regional boat show outdoor, such as that. So that would be it'd be boat show light, is I think what Mr. Wara suggested it being, but that could be kind of an exciting first outdoor event moving forward, but they're still making sure to work with the appropriate government agencies. Then we talked about the marine terminal modernization plan, just a very high level. They'll probably be bringing something to us to get creative, but it was wonderful to hear that the city and the port staff, both entities, are working together to try to find some solutions so that we can better utilize the port property and have industry there while still kind of following the city's expectations. The third item was the Blue Zone, which I think is pretty exciting. And it's a new initiative. I believe Charles Hall from the hospital kind of brought this to the city, the county, the school district, and the hospital. And it's an interesting kind of idea of communities dedicated to living more healthy. And there's some examples in Costa Rica, Denmark, there's some in California, but I believe you guys are going to do some initial meetings. It's just kind of like an overall goals for our community. That might be an interesting thing that would fit in Anacortes. But that is very early on kind of discussions, but I think it's a really neat example of all the different groups working together to better our community. And then finally, the last one was just the bathroom update at the depot. It's, I believe, should probably the punch list be completed by now, but that it's just great to have more bathrooms open to the public. So yeah, that's all I think from the port. And we will be meeting a week early, the last Tuesday in March of of this month. So there you go.
Okay, any comments? All right, we'll move on then now to item 2C. It's a Housing Affordability and Community Services Committee, better known as HACS.
Mayor Gear,
Yes, Ms. Walton.
thank you. The HACS committee met on March 3rd, and it was Ms. Cleland McGrath, Mr. Walters, and I with staff. And also Mr. Frank Jaretsky from the Planning Commission was there. He is going to help staff do some research into a down payment assistance program that is in operation in Bellingham. This idea was brought to us by one of our constituents. And so Mr. Miesmer and Mr. Jaretsky are seeing if they're going to talk to their contacts in Bellingham to see if that is an option that we could start here in Anacortes. So we'll report back on that. We talked about some of the Senate and House bills in the state legislature that are moving forward that we're watching. Nothing concrete to report yet. The Small Business Development Grants program is almost at completion, and there is some CARES CDBG money left for rental assistance for community members that will be administered through the Anacortes Family Center. So we are grateful for that money and that help from the Family Center. We also are planning ahead at HACS. We're working on our matrix of social service providers and services offered, and this ongoing project to identify those and the gaps. And we are reaching out very soon to community members and stakeholders who we feel that are a great resource to help fill in that matrix and identify ways that we can improve it moving forward. So we're really excited to be making progress on that. And that is pretty much it, as I recall.
Okay, thank you. Our Finance Committee report? Do we have a Finance Committee? Maybe not.
There, sorry, Mayor Gear.
Hi, Jeremy.
Due to my travels, I was more of a listening participant, but I believe that we're going to go over several of the things that we talked about with the positions with the library and the city later in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, the Planning Committee.
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton.
Thanks. The Planning Committee met right before this meeting. Again, Ms. Cleland McGrath, Mr. Walters, and I and staff, and we went right up to 6 o'clock because we had so much to talk about. And one of those things was the Shoreline Master Program, which is going to the Planning Commission this coming Wednesday, where they will discuss public comments, and then that will be coming forward to council. Also, the Critical Areas Ordinance is moving right along. There will be public notice in the middle of this month for comments on the third draft of the ordinance, and that will come to council around mid-April. There are also some minor updates requested by FEMA to our flood management code, which is separate from the other codes we've been talking about. They're just sort of minor, but the Planning Commission will be working on those too. So the bulk of our meeting was spent on talking about the R4 zone and the bonus height option that is allowed in our most recently adopted development regulations from 2019. And we will see some alternatives coming to council, some ideas that we will talk about as a group. And then those ideas will go to the Planning Commission, and they will discuss them and refine them further, and then they will come back to us to review and adopt. In the meantime, our moratorium expires on April 21st, so staff will be coming to us to extend that potentially for another 6 months, but we're raring to go on getting this worked on and adopted. And we'll have a presentation from Mr. Miesmer very soon on that. So we'll all be up to speed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'm going to move on to item 3, which is public comment. And if you're a member of the audience and want to talk to the council about anything that is not on the agenda tonight, please raise your hand and you have 3 minutes to talk to the council. Okay, I don't see any hands raised. So we're going to move on then to our consent agenda, item 4, A through D. Council, your pleasure.
Mayor Gear,
Mr. Miller.
I move to approve consent agenda items A through D.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, a second by Mr. Carter. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same
Aye.
sign.
But that was second by Mr. McDougall.
What's that?
That was second by Mr. McDougall.
Okay, all righty. Oh, I'm sorry, McDougall, okay.
All
All
good.
right. Motion, it was, well, it passes. I had 7 ayes. Thank you. So we're now moving to item 5, which is a closed record decision hearing. And it's open for public comment, and if you are a party of record. And at this time, Mr. Miesmer will introduce the Bayside Marina replacement plan. And Mr. Miesmer.
Thank you, Mayor. So I would like to introduce Ms. Tess Cooper. She's our project manager for this particular project. So Tess, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Miesmer.
There she is. Okay.
Let me get caught up here. My screen's situated. Thank you, City Council, members of the public, for having me this evening to present the project for Bayside Moorage Marina replacement. I have a short presentation to give you an overview of the project, and then I'm available, as well as I believe the consultants and contractors are available as well, to answer any pointed questions you have before we open it up to any parties of record that would be here to speak regarding the project. Let me find the share screen so that we can get that started. Okay. Tonight, Bayside Moorage Marina replacement. Sorry, let me answer a question really quick. Party of record. Get to that point. Okay, so applicant for this project is Marine Floats Corporation. And the property owner is Jeff Wright. The proposed use is, an existing use is marina and boat moorage. The zone is marine mixed use. The location is 2410 Skyline Way, assessor's parcel number 32370. And prior to this project, for general meetings, was a development review group and neighborhood meeting. On February 10th, we had Planning Commission open record pre-decision hearing. And this evening, we are having the City Council closed record decision hearing. Proposal for the project is shoreline substantial development permit to remove, demolish, and dispose of existing creosote pilings and floating marina for a total of 7,968 square feet. 43 galvanized steel piling will be installed, and new floating docks using the EnviroCrete system will be fabricated in Tacoma and towed over water to the Bayside Moorage Marina for installation. The existing pier and ramps will be reused and redecked with new grading. The project is a like-for-like replacement within the existing footprint using contemporary design to reduce the environmental impact. You can see an overview of the location of the marina here. We have 3 different docks proposed, and we'll look at the layout of those here shortly. Mandatory pre-application was held on June 2nd, 2020, and the neighborhood meeting was held on August 5th of 2020 as well. Their formal application was submitted on September 23rd and determined complete on November 6th. Noticing of the application was on November 11th, and noticing for the hearing was on January 20th, 2021. The SEPA determination was made on January 13th, 2021. Public comments were received from neighbors with concerns about noise and vibration in relation to the pile driving activities. One agency comment was received from Ecology in regards to a toxic control cleanup site in the vicinity. As far as critical areas in the project area, the site was evaluated through a habitat survey dated July 16th, 2020 that identified population of listed species that were present. And the project was designed to minimize impacts as much as feasible with contemporary building materials to result in a net ecological gain. This is just a quick map of the habitat survey and the transects and the species that were observed. Species included kelp, different types of kelp, eelgrass, and so forth. Microalgae. Sorry. In the marine mixed use zone, it's designated for special mix of commercial, cultural, recreational, and residential uses in a high amenity area along the waterfront or special waterfront relationship. The design of uses is intended to emphasize the unique marine setting by providing marine access and views from the public spaces and establishing and maintaining pedestrian-friendly character. Marinas and boat moorage are permitted in the mixed marine use area, as you can see here. Shoreline Management Act requirements that this project is related to include RCW 9058.030 2F, which states that any development that lies within 200 feet of the shoreline of statewide significance is subject to conformance with the Anacortes Shoreline Master Program. The subject proposal is located entirely within the aquatic shoreline environmental designation as specified in the SMP. And according to table F or 5.1 in the SMP, marinas are permitted in the aquatic environmental designation. You can see here that the location of the project is at the very end of the spit here in Skyline, and a little bit closer view of the parcel and the marina. This is the proposed site plan for the new marina. We have docks BC, BB, and BA. You can see here the ramp and the height with the pilings, as well as the configuration with the concrete and the environmental grading. So this is the layout of section A, the layout of section C, and then the layout of section B. There's some photos to make our concept of the project a little bit easier. This is a photo of dock B with the gangway, existing gangway and existing dock. With the layout here, we have dock BB with the gangway and the dock layout. This is just a small capture of the entire dock area. And we have dock BA, again with the gangway and the dock area. The project scope includes that the remaining gangways and ramps are to remain, or if any surfacing needs replaced, they'll just replace it. Most of them are metal and won't need replaced, but as you can see, dock A has a few wooden planks that potentially could need some maintenance. You can see the concrete existing floats here. Those are going to be what's removed. And this is a design courtesy of Marine Float's website to show you what the new concrete and plastic grade or fiberglass grading will look like. It'll be again in the same configuration and footprint. It'll just be new materials. Additionally, all of the creosote piles are proposed to be replaced with new steel piles for a total of 43. The recommendation for the approval of this project in the staff report is that staff recommends approval subject to the conditions of approval that are listed, including the scope of the project shall not exceed that set out in the shoreline permit application. FEMA habitat assessment report must be submitted and building permits with the city of Anacortes prior to work. All applicable permits, local, state, and federal, shall be secured. Development shall comply with mitigation measures listed in the SEPA mitigated determination of significance. Hours of construction are limited to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week, unless a noise variance is obtained. Noise levels shall not exceed those standards as established by the state pursuant to the RCW. Applicant landowners shall comply with all federal statutes, including endangered species, clean water, mammal protection. The project shall comply with applicable shoreline master program regulations in our shoreline master program with the specific sections listed out in the condition. Development shall comply with AMC 1816-130 for the regulation of shoreline permits, which is just specifying the time frame and expiration of said permits. And there's a condition that staff reserves the right to supplement the record in case of any matters or additional concerns come up from Planning Commission or City Council. The Planning Commission overviewed the project and considered staff's recommendation, and they as well recommend approval of the shoreline substantial development permit with the conditions as listed in the staff report. And you can see all commissioners in attendance voted in favor of. That's all I have for official presentation. I'm happy to answer questions as well as have any of the consultants or contractors answer specific question that you may have.
Hey, Gare.
Mr. Young.
Ms. Cooper, I may have missed it, but I didn't see when we thought this might be able to begin and how long it may take to complete.
That's a good question. That information is not included in the application. It will be all subject to state and federal fish windows. This will have to go to the Army Corps of Engineers, of course, and did get approved by Department of Fish and Wildlife already. So I can pull up that permit, the HPA approval, if we want to look more in depth at that.
No, actually, you know, I think I was just curious how long it might take. I guess my thoughts were about the work beginning from 7 and ending at around 10 p.m. if necessary, 7 days a week. So I was just curious how long they thought once the project starts, it might take to complete, so we have some guesstimation to give, you know, the neighborhood, should they have any questions about that.
Yeah, absolutely. From my recollection, the contractor described that in the hearing with the Planning Commission, and it was small hours where they would be doing pile driving during the day for, I think a total of a week or maybe maximum 2 weeks for pile replacement. If they're in attendance, they might be able to answer.
So Chess, that, oh, you're talking about a contractor? Because I do have, I think, a party of record that wants to speak also. So do we have a contractor that can address that, and then I can call them the party of record? Okay, well, let me take the party of record. Tabitha Simonetti, I see your hands up, and if you're a party of record, you may speak.
She is the representative of the project.
Oh, perfect. Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I work with Marine Floats. We are the contractor. I don't see the pile driving taking any longer than a week, and then probably another week to install. Again, everything is pre-manufactured in Tacoma. and then installed on site. And then it'll be all towed over water. And that window for Fish and Wildlife is between August 18th and February 15th.
Okay.
So if I might follow up, Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
that answers my question. I guess what I was trying to just get to is more about the pile driving, just to make sure that the neighborhood wasn't disturbed but for so long, and we could give them some type of indication as to when and how it might, play out. So thank you.
Yeah, and we also, we only work during daylight hours just because we don't want our boats out in the dark either. So I don't see it going past anywhere near 10 p.m. usually.
Okay,
Mayor Geard.
definitely. Mr. Miller.
First of all, Ms. Cooper, thanks for the excellent presentation, and the packet was very clear. Same concerns that Mr. Young brought up. I think since this will be the last time we'll talk about this probably in a public forum, the 7 to 10 p.m. window seems pretty wide, but I know we do this because we understand we're trying to give a wide range of times because we know eelgrass season, and it's a 2-year. I think we give you 2 years to complete the project. But of course, as we're all representing the people in the area, we want to make sure that the noise impact is as minimal as possible. And the other question, and getting the creosote pilings out is great. So it's a great project. Happy you're doing it. The other question I have is, you said a week, but I just want to make sure you coordinate hopefully with the other marinas, because I don't know how long it would take to drag the actual pieces in, because it's a pretty narrow entrance there, and might plug the entrance way for a little while getting in and out of the marina. So the more you communicate that to the other marinas, I think that would be very appreciated by everybody in that area when you're bringing the docks in.
Yeah, absolutely. I will definitely make a note of that. I know typically we do reach out to the adjoining properties, and so I'll make an extra note of that. And then typically we would load the piling as they come out onto our barges.
Because during that time frame, obviously that's that's boating season in there. Yeah, and this old Navy guy, I'm looking at the narrow passage in there, and if you're bringing in large docks, it's going to impact the other folks. So the more you communicate that to the other boaters there, the happier everybody will be when you do this, which looks like a really good project.
Yeah, happy to do that for sure.
Okay. Are there any other parties of record that want to address the council on this tonight? All right, I don't see anyone with their hands up. So oh wait, someone, Jerry Rutledge. Go ahead, Jerry, you're welcome to speak. I think your mic is off, Jerry.
Can you hear me now?
We can, welcome.
Fine, thank you very much. I'm on the board of directors and a resident of 2411, which is the Bayside East condominiums. And we're adjacent to and in the proximity of the project. In fact, we're only 50 feet away from the toe from the seawall there of the Marina project. And I just want to reiterate our concerns. We made comments during the planning commission and also during the public forum. I appreciate Mr. Young's comments because that's in alignment with the concerns, our main concerns. One were potential damage from vibration of setting the piles, and then the noise level and duration of the noise of the vibration techniques they're going to use and the impact of the hammer blows for the final setting of the piles. It's unknown to us as well as to how deep the piles have to go, the extent of those hammer blows, the noise levels that may reach, and the duration of that noise. So we as residents there do have a concern, and again, the duration of the project, the 7 to 10 hours, including Saturdays and Sundays, is a concern to us. We enjoy living there, and we would appreciate whatever the contractor can do to provide us with the quiet enjoyment of our homes and our surrounding. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Rutledge. Capita, do you want to respond to that at all, or?
Yeah, so as we've said before, again, this is normal construction. We've never had reports of any damage happening to buildings nearby. It'll be regular construction hours, and we do our best to mitigate the sounds as best we can.
Is there normally vibration involved?
Yeah, so it's installed with a vibratory hammer, but the majority of the vibrations will be contained in the water. It won't really, it'll vibrate sound out, but it won't cause, we've never seen it cause damage to foundation.
Thank you. Okay, any other parties of record? I want to make sure the council hears from all of you. Okay, so Tess, do you have more to tell us, or is it time for the council to mull this over?
It's your turn.
All right.
Given all the information I have.
All right, thank you. Okay, council, what are your thoughts?
You're here?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. I just would like to say that I appreciate that this project is the exact square footage and a complete like-for-like replacement of the existing structures, and that it is going to be far more environmentally sound with the removal of the creosote pilings and their replacement with, I believe, steel, and also the EnviroCrete surface of the docks that will allow more light in and will be more beneficial for plant and animal life and result in net ecological gain.
Thank you.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Walters.
I concur on that point. Anytime that we can remove creosote, we are getting further ahead, and anytime we can provide more light into the water, we're improving things. I'm glad to see this project. The constraint, the condition that's in the conditions of approval, setting the noise control between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., I think is quite a bit less aggressive than we could have conditioned the project on. I know it's consistent with what's in our code, but our code doesn't have much. You know, it has references to the WAC, and we could consider a code amendment in the future to more effectively deal with noise and provide a better pathway for variances from the standard provisions where it makes sense, but also better constrain noise where it just isn't required. So I was glad to hear that the contractor say that this is going to be a limited scope of the noise that actually is going to occur anyway. So that doesn't make me think that we need to further condition the project, but I do think that we need to be very sensitive to that, because the standard limits that are in the WAC, 10 to 7, are too wide 7 days a week for what I would consider reasonable. And we should amend our code to reflect what we think is reasonable. If that's it, then great. But if anyone else agrees with me, I think we should limit it further. Otherwise, I'm prepared to approve this permit.
Okay,
Mayor Gear,
Mr. Miller.
and if that was a motion, I'd second it. But before I'd make one more comment on that. I think I heard the contractor say the painful noise and vibration part, when they actually go, is only going to be a week or two. So even though this is a two-year permit. So, but again, communicating to the neighbors to let them know when it's happening always is more helpful than the surprise of 1 week of vibration and noise. But again, good project, and you always have to suffer through a little bit of construction.
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton.
I would like to revisit at some point. I think that based on what the consultant said, it's fine for this project, but I'm agree with Mr. Walters. I would like to revisit the hours because 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week seems really, in general, very generous to the disturbers of the peace and a little onerous to the residents and the people that have to live with it day after day. So, but I'm in favor of the project as presented with conditions.
All right.
Hey,
So,
dear.
Mr. Young.
Just wanted to thank Mr. Rutledge for his comments. I think it's important that we also hear from constituents so we know just how much of an impact, and we're reminded of that part of it. Even though I love, the work that's about to be done for all the environmental reasons and every other reason, and the footprint. But I think it's also important to be always cognizant of those people that are directly affected. And that's also why I do think it's something council should revisit at some point in the future about limiting that just a little bit when and where appropriate, such in cases like this. But I do appreciate the contractor pointing out that this will be between limited windows of daytime hours, although, they may have that ability to go longer. But I do like that and I appreciate that. So I'm ready to move forward.
Okay. Mr. Walters, do you want to make a formal statement?
Sure. I move that we approve the shoreline substantial development permit as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Walters, a second by Mr. Miller. Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote?
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Ms. Cleveland McGrath,
Yes.
Ms. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. McDougall,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Carter,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. So at this time, we're going to move on to item 6 under other business. Item 6A is the Socrata City Budget Information Sharing Platform. Mr. Hoagland will introduce this topic tonight.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the audience. I wanted to just remind council that was back on in December of last year, City Council adopted Ordinance 3078, which adopted the annual budget for 2021. And Section 6 of that ordinance directed that CFC investigate options for data platforms to access city financial information by the public. And so that's what we are doing here tonight. So we have Melissa, Kyle, and Brett with us. They're with Socrata. Socrata is a division of Tyler, and they're going to be doing a presentation on the Socrata data platform. I believe Melissa is going to be doing the bulk of the work here. So I'll turn it over to her.
Hi folks, I'll go ahead and just share my screen.
Are you sharing, Melissa? Getting there?
Definitely attempting to.
All right. Thanks. And thanks, Mayor, City Council members, residents, and Steve and the rest of the team. So we'll do a quick introduction here. My name is Brett Nalder. I am your, go ahead and flip slides here, Melissa. I am your account executive. I handle sales in the great state of Washington for Tyler Data and Insights, which is a part of Tyler Technologies. We'll go through that briefly. I'm also joined today by Melissa, who's your solutions engineer, and Kyle Hall, who is brings a lot of experience to this whole project, this effort, and working with the city, as Kyle is both a former user of our products and now helps develop the products. He a lot of experience working in the city of Los Angeles under Control Galbraith. So, all right, next slide, please. Brief history on Tyler. We'll spend 1 minute on this. Our focus for tonight is going to be on the applications that we're proposing to the city. Both of the applications that we propose are public-facing applications, and so the consumption of that data is very usable and very easy to understand. So, from a Tyler perspective, Tyler Technologies, I don't know how much all of you know about Tyler, but Tyler's the largest publicly traded publicly traded software company that focuses specifically on public sector. And so just looking at the state of Washington, Tyler Technologies has focused on all of those different functional areas of a city or county or state government that might be in use. And so from a public safety perspective, Snohomish County is a customer, Norcom 911 is a customer. Last year we signed a statewide deal for our Odyssey products, which will be case management. So all levels of state of courts within the state will use Tyler Technologies. Skagit County is an appraisal and tax customer, and City of Anacortes is a ERP customer. And so Tyler focuses on those different vertical lines of business within city and county government. And then all the way over to the left, Tyler Data and Insights, and that's us. So what we bring to the table is a cloud-based, secure data sharing platform with applications built on top of that to help people consume the data. And so next slide, Melissa. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So quick agenda for tonight. We have 2 products or 2 applications that we'll be proposing to the city to help with the things that Steve mentioned about transparency. And our focus is to help government access data, discover data, and then make data more usable. So in the end, make everybody more data driven. That's how we got here today. The products again, open finance, open performance, given in that sequence, and in the spirit of time and making sure we're keeping on track here, I will now toss it over to Melissa, who will begin the demonstration and actual consumption of the products. Over to you, Melissa.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brett. So hi, everyone. My name is Melissa. Again, like Brett mentioned, I'm a solutions engineer at Socrata, and I'm actually based out of Seattle. So I've been to beautiful Anacortes a couple times, and I'm really excited to be speaking with you all today. So to kind of show you what our applications can do, I thought it might be interesting to kind of see a mix of both a mock-up of what it would like to see your own data on our applications. So that will be powered by an extract that Phil, who's really been the MVP of this process, where he helped us get the data from your own ERP system into our application for you to see, as well as some live customers. And to keep those customer examples relevant, I also kind of picked customers with a similar So I guess with Open Finance, like Brett mentioned, what we offer is kind of applications that can help you provide financial data to the public in a way that's really easy to understand, so that you can kind of show them how you're putting their tax dollars to work for them. And the 2 that we thought would make the most sense to show you in our Open Finance suite, kind of based on prior conversations with Phil and Steve, were 1, our Open Expenditures or Open Checkbook, sometimes it's called, application that really gives you a deep dive into that line-by-line spending. And 2, our Open Budget application that kind of helps you aggregate expenditures and revenue, so you can better understand things like actual versus expected numbers. So the first thing I'm going to show you is Open Expenditures, and the second thing I'll show you is Open Budget. So here is a kind of a mocked up version of what it might look like for you as a city of Anacortes to have our Open Expenditures app. Again, this is powered by data coming out of your own ERP systems that Philip was so nice to provide us with. As you can see, what you get here when you land is the home page. You can kind of customize it to look like what City of Anacortes wants it to look like. I just kind of pulled these colors and pictures from your own city website, so people will know that when they land on this page, they're looking at a city website. And as you go down, you can kind of start to dig into your spending summary, which we aggregate up here in a visualization. You can see we do a little bit of analytics to provide context about historical averages over time, so you can contextualize what current spend looks like versus prior spend. And of course, all of these at the very bottom here are all customizable kind of tiles that you can highlight, maybe key analytics if you have, folks frequently asking certain questions, maybe, which vendors are paying the most. They can easily access those by clicking on one of these configured tiles to help answer those questions. Now, if you're actually drilling down into one of these tiles, you'll be taken into our drill down view. And what we've really found over the years of working with government customers and solely government customers in finance is that what makes financial information really different from other types of information is that it's not self-interpreting. If you give someone a spreadsheet of financial data and they don't have a financial background, they might not interpret it correctly. And, you know, I'm a member of the public, I can program in Python, but I don't have a financial background, and I certainly will not interpret a spreadsheet of financial data correctly. And so what you're about to see is sort of our out-of-the-box interface, where we've done a tremendous amount of research testing and continuous improvement on how people really consume that financial data, interpret it accurately, and then put that research to bear in this product. So what you see is kind of exploring this data is very intuitive, or it's meant to be very intuitive. You've got kind of different levels of the hierarchy that you can drill down into as you click into each of these items. So for instance, if I was curious about the general fund, I could click into that, and it allows me to drill down into the deeper categories within these hierarchies. Now, for instance, I was curious about, I don't know, say the police fund. I could click on that, and I could understand how the police fund was spread across these different categories. And of course, this is all configurable kind of depending on how you want to spread this out. As I could click through, I might want to see this data presented in different ways. So I might click a pie chart, and this refreshes this to give me a pie chart view. I might also want to look at the spend over time. And of course, I can click on any of these options to kind of understand the breakdown of how these different amounts are being spent. I'll just kind of scroll down so you can see. We also have the ledger details. So if you want the numbers aggregated up, you can view that here very easily as well. Now, if I go back to the general fund, something I might be curious about is maybe how my spend is across vendors. So what I can do is I can actually pivot across to vendor name and see how my spend in my general fund is broken down by different vendors. Now, for instance, I might be curious about what it looks like to see my electric spend over time. Here you can see how much the electric bill kind of varies over time. Maybe you can see seasonality. Of course, in the summertime, maybe the bill is higher. Wintertime bill is higher for different needs. And of course, you can always flip through and understand different trends over time to better contextualize what you're looking at. So all of this kind of to be able to provide information at your fingertips to understand your own financial data. I can also do things like flip over to Checkbook View, which of course allows me to see the actual line-by-line items that are being paid out. I can click further and look at the actual additional details provided. And of course, this is all just kind of dependent on the data that comes out of your own ERP system. So if you have more data that you have in there that you want to display, we can always choose to display that here as well. Now, kind of depending on how quickly you want to refresh this might not be just interesting for yourselves or for residents of Anacortes, but also for vendors to keep track of if they want to see how their payments here in very real-time manner. The other interesting thing you kind of see from this kind of drill down is maybe you drill into something like, I want to say insurance, which is often something that gets spread across multiple departments. And you see here, you have insurance being spread across human resources, police, planning committee, medic, and fire. And this might provide you with insight and opportunity as a trigger to make sure that maybe you want to do some contract consolidation across these multiple departments using the same vendor. That's something that you can see and get triggered to do that. So all of this is kind of just showing you ways to explore your own data through our application. What we do is we try to take as big of an extract as possible out of your ERP system. And then as you click through these different buttons that I just showed you, drilling down into the data, drilling up, looking at these different types of graphs and charts to present your data, you're just getting different slices of data of that very same big extract. And the idea is that we really try to automate it so that, it's always up to date. And when you look at it, you're looking at a shared understanding of what's happening within Anacortes' finances. So maybe instead of asking Philip to run a query for report A or B to make a decision for your council meeting, this is kind of meant to help replace some of that workflow, since each of these different drill downs and filters essentially acts as a specific report to give you information really at your fingertips. And that's what we've really had a lot of customers do. We've seen them project this during their council meetings, or more commonly, the other application I'm about to show you, the open budget application, to help make decisions off of that shared, easy to understand view of live data. Now, a couple further features. Oh, go ahead.
I just had a quick couple questions about this part of. Will the data be seamless, or does this require a person to sort of deliberately transfer it over to this program? And then my second question is, how updated will these data points be? Meaning, is it once a quarter, once a month, or is it instantaneously as the data is brought in and transferred over?
Yeah, so I'll take a first stab at it, and then Kyle, I might switch over to you. But for us, we try to, as much as possible, automate this process. So we have some clients who are grabbing data from their systems, maybe at a daily cadence, a weekly cadence, monthly cadence. It's really up to you, but it sort of just depends on what your accounting system is and what makes sense for you. Kyle, is there anything else we should add to that?
Yeah, Councilmember, that's a fantastic question. Our recommendation is certainly to make this information as up to date as possible. As you might imagine, the value is much greater when it is updated more regularly than more slowly. So in terms of what our software enables, we enable update up to, I think technically the lowest we'll support for this is every 3 minutes, but the most typical cadence is daily load for expenditures, bi-weekly for payroll, and then either daily or weekly for budget data. I'll note that, as I think we mentioned, the ERP system that Anacortes is using is produced by Tyler Technologies, so we do expect to have that data automated and flowing over to our system in a non-manual fashion.
Okay, because I think that answers my question. I guess what I was looking at was, if this required extra effort rather than almost seamless, and I think you mentioned is every couple of minutes or however we decide that we want to have this information updated for the public as well for us.
Right, that's absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Great question. Any other questions while we're paused?
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, kind of along the same lines. Obviously, if you weren't already an ERP provider for us, you're using, I guess my question is, you're using our real data for this demonstration. So it would be pretty automated. Is that correct? Because you're already using our data because you're our ERP provider.
Yes. So for just this demonstration, we did ask Philip to just send over a file, but for the actual implementation of this, it would be an automated thing.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, good question.
Yes, go ahead.
I think this is sort of related. So as far as staff time, it is going to be fairly automated. It's not going to be, what kind of staff time would this require additionally to what they're already doing?
Yeah, so, Kyle, go ahead.
Oh, yes. I'm happy to provide a little bit of context there. So most typically, and just for context to introduce myself, I worked on a program of this nature with the city of Los Angeles. So obviously a little bit slightly bigger data, but same general kind of setup of the program. And most typically, the way that these are set up is there's an implementation process, which involves, setting up that data automation, and mostly just making sure that the way the data is presented aligns to the expectations of city staff and of yourselves. So for example, we have some automatic rules that we apply to exclude if there's payments to undercover officers or reimbursements to individuals who may be under 18, which are typically protected, or the small other category of payments that are exempt from public records law. So we'll work with your staff to exclude those payments, make sure the data is presented accurately, and then it's just an automated process. And then typically once a year as part of the budget process, the majority of our customers, and Melissa in just a moment will show you the open budget application, is typically updated in conjunction with the release of the budget book or with the release of the annual budget. mostly because there's an opportunity to highlight the message of the city council and the mayor and the city in that application. And so there's typically a desire to make sure that is up to date so that the message you're putting out to your community is also up to date. But generally speaking, it's really just those small number of sort of content updates, which are, you sort of type words into an interface. So nothing sophisticated, and then that initial setup process. And that's the bulk of the effort.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Councilman?
Not entirely, actually. So as far as initial training for the implementation and day-to-day, I'm kind of looking for a number here. Is it like a 3-hour, like what's the training time? And I mean, it seems like it will be user-friendly all the way around, but I just want to make sure that it's going to be easy for staff to implement, and that's basically it.
Absolutely. So the whole setup process, once again, is really the primary effort, and it's really just the work to set up that flow. That's typically a process that's complete within a few days. There's education and training courses that are available on demand in terms of the use of the application and data automation. And then typically with the purchase of this tool, there's a services team coming from Tyler who will do the vast majority of the effort in terms of initial implementation is part of the package that we provide. So it's difficult to provide an exact number. It's certainly as low as 20 hours of staff time is not atypical. It can be higher depending on the particular types of requests that you have in terms of kind of configuring how that data is presented, and occasionally depending on the source system, but that is in the sort of order of magnitude that I would expect on an annual basis.
Okay, that does answer my question. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Melissa, do you want to take us to the next part?
Great, yes, absolutely. So let's see, here I'm back up at the general fund level. And I just wanted to show you a couple other features that our application does provide in addition to kind of that drill down slicing of the data. So in addition to this, let's see if I go back to general fund. Other things we can do is kind of add annotations to this application. So for instance, water fund had a particularly big spend. If you click into this, you can do things like add applications to give context to maybe what's going on, to help people understand, why this number looks so big. So here I've just added, my custom annotations. Spend is for the water treatment plant, clear well, and raw water line. And I've added out a link to just an article I found about this particular project. And of course, this just kind of helps people understand how their tax dollars are being put to work for them, to give further context to what's happening with this financial data. The other things to note that might be kind of helpful as you're using an application like this is that we do save kind of these views for you to easily share out. And what I mean is that if you actually click on this URL and you copy this and you send it to someone else, it will open up to this exact same view with the exact same filters showed up. So I don't know if you've kind of used other applications before, but sometimes you have to send it to them and you have to tell them, click on this filter, click on that button, and then you'll see what I'm seeing. You won't have that with us. We just kind of save that for you. You can also do things like share out this through social media, share it through a web link. And then we also provide kind of code for you to be able to embed this particular maybe slice of the data, this particular visualization in another place if you wanted to. So for instance, if you had the city website and you wanted to embed this table on there, you could do that through this code snippet that we provide for your city webmaster. The final thing to think about is, we present this information in what we hope to be as an intuitive way as possible, but you might also have some very data savvy residents who want to actually see this data as well. So what we do is we provide that data for you. So in the very bottom left right-hand corner, you can click get this data on Socrata. I'll open this up in a new tab. And what that does is allows me to actually view the data that's powering the site, if that's something you chose to make available to your residents, and they could actually take a look at this information on their own. But of course, it's a little bit kind of tough to interpret, I think, unless you really understand, financial information, but always an option. So that wraps up my walkthrough. Oh, go ahead.
Got the geek question of the night for you. That data is presented as kind of a table format. Is it available via API as well?
Yeah, I love that question. So we do. So we can do things like export it out through CSV. We can access it through what we call our SODA API, which allows you to programmatically filter through the data, through query parameters. And then I'm not sure if it would make sense for this data set, but you can also access it through OData, which is what allows you to plug this kind of data into things like Power BI or Tableau seamlessly.
Cool. Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councilmember, just for context, the application using that same API that's available to the public. So that is full access and very much part of the a fantastic thing to call out, but very much part of what we provide, although it's not necessarily usually noticed by the council members we talk to. So that's a great call out.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd also note that we are currently making our expense data available in open document spreadsheet format, and that's required by our code. But we could rescind that requirement in our code if we had it available in this much better, much improved, much more user accessible format, especially because you can go behind all the pretty pictures and get to the data this way. That could save staff time over what we're currently doing now.
And Councilmember, just one small note. We're not here to sort of push a hard sell or anything, but that is very much when we think about this application, it is really on net a reduction of staff time and effort, because any request that's coming from the public, even many internal requests, can be very effectively automated through this, this data transfer. So any time that's spent, pulling those reports from the system or keeping spreadsheets up to date can be replaced just by accessing this one sort of very definitive, very up-to-date source for information. And so on balance, we do see that as a way to save some staff time and allow them to offload some requests. And I think extremely importantly for this body, provide a great experience to your public who are trying to better understand their city and how that city is spending those tax dollars. Because part of the point here is to make this information available to, if you have constituents who may not have a desktop, it's mobile accessible, constituents who may have, who are low sighted or may have color blindness issues, the site is 508 accessible. So there's a tremendous amount of focus and accessibility to the data as well as to the application that is all kind of enmeshed in how we build those applications.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kyle. All right, so the next thing I wanted to show you was our open budget application. So here I thought it might be interesting to show you an example of another city who's implemented this, Vacaville, California. They actually use Eden for their ERP system. So same as you, and you can kind of see what they've done with this application through that. So here with Open Budget, it's kind of similar where they were able to customize their homepage to kind of meet their design needs. And then we've got the operating budget summary where you can start to understand things like aggregate expenditure and revenue numbers. So understanding those actual versus expected numbers. With revenue, that's where they've titled, where the money comes from, that's their revenue. That's where you can understand projected revenue versus actual revenue, and then where the money goes is their budget, their operating budget, or their expenses. So you can understand things like budget versus actuals. Now, if I actually click on this, this takes me again to that similar drill down view, but the biggest difference here is that we have the ability to kind of start looking at comparative information. So your budgeted versus your actual expense. And then in this case, they've got expense and encumbered amount. So as the year goes by, you've got the inner bar and the outer inner bar slowly filling up to meet the outer bar, and sort of watching that fill throughout the year is one of the things you're doing as you're running the government and trying to make sure that you're going to meet your this year's budget. It's very similar to the application you saw before, where if you click in, you can start to drill down into individual pieces of the data. They've got a slightly different hierarchy than you, which is why you might see kind of different drill down categories and what you're familiar with seeing. If you scroll down, you can kind of see they have ledger details attached to the general fund. One of the different things about government accounting in particular, we know is kind of that you have fund-based accounting. So you tie the funds, you can tie these to funds and kind of present that information more intuitively that way. And of course, the value of this application really is to help you have that dynamic budget versus actuals report loaded onto our Socrata cloud to make that very easily accessible and updated. Kyle, is there anything else you might want to add or before we move on to the next section?
No, I think that's fantastic. Just want that those actuals numbers are going to be automated as part of that regular cadence throughout the year and for your budget reviews. And if you're doing budget hearings throughout the year or any kind of check-ins, this is a really fantastic, fully automated way to keep track of how departments are doing on their spending relative to their budgeted allocations. So we find that city council members and staff and department managers tend to be very heavy users of this application.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Mr. Walters.
So, Melissa, did I understand you correctly that the police department is funded by two separate funds, but they're rolling those two funds up into the one department in this view?
Let's see.
The fund level would normally be the top level, like on our paper documents that our finance director prepares for us. We would start by seeing the fund and we'd see police under two different funds, but here you've got two funds rolled up into one department.
Yeah, I think that's what they've got here, and it looks like, yep. And then for these, yeah, all of these are kind of configurable depending on what your structure or their structure of the data looks like. So it's just kind of how they chose to present it.
But you have the option.
Kyle, anything else? Yeah. Oh yeah.
You have the option of choosing between them. I mean, that strikes me as really powerful, so that we can group expenditures in different funds that are related to the same department together.
Yeah, Melissa, if you don't mind clicking on that top level really quickly, just the where the money goes, just starting at that root level, and then clicking on the drop down there, the department drop down. So Councilmember, exactly as you called out there, throughout this application, you have the ability to pivot at any level to any accounting attribute that is configured in the application. So in this particular case, they chose to start with department, then go to fund. They could choose to start with fund, then go to department. But also, Melissa could just say, hey, I want to see my types of funds, or even go down to the program level and say, hey, I want to see this program across all departments and all funds. Think about each one of those pivots. It's a whole different report you'd have to run out of your ERP system to get these totals. So there's a tremendous amount of power in that flexible drill down.
That's pretty exciting right there.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Thanks, Kyle. All right, any other questions before we turn it over to Brett?
All right, thanks, Melissa. Thanks, City. So next we will just a quick recap. So Melissa's shown you a couple of the applications that make up our open finance platform, open expenditures, open budget. There's actually a third, which is open payroll. We're not going to show you that tonight due to for time's sake, but know that that is probably the number one accessed data set in all of our applications is what are city officials making on the payroll expense. So that's available to you if you all would like it. But now we're going to shift a little bit to open performance. So open performance provides the city with the ability to tie KPIs, objectives, measures, whatever you want to call them, to financial objectives for the city to show track results in a dynamic fashion. And so we've got the open finance applications as well as open performance. Shifting gears now to show open performance. All right. And with that, over to Melissa. Yep.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Brett. So here I have pulled up the Camas performance site. So Camas, another city in Washington, kind of a lot further down south than y'all. So Open Performance is one of our applications that allows you to kind of create custom narrative and visualization pages, as well as visualizations tied to key performance indicators, and present that data to the public. And for City of Camas, what they've done is they've kind of have some, key strategic initiatives, and they might have key performance indicators tied to those strategic initiatives that they roll out. But they also, through this kind of application, present financial data out to the public. So what I'll show you is, this is their home page for their performance application, kind of stylized for Camas again. And if I navigate actually over to one of their narrative pages, what we call perspective pages, this is how they sort of present specific information out to the public around their financial information. So this is kind of their narrative canvas. All of this is created through a drag and drop interface that they can just kind of rearrange, customize whatever text that they want to have here. And they actually have embedded the graphs and charts that you saw from one of their open budget applications onto this to, again, help give context to these graphs. Well, all they've done is provided additional narrative next to it. Now, if you actually click on this graph, and I'll open it up another tab, what it does is it pulls you back to their own open budget application. So just taking you directly to the data that they want to talk about. So that's how Camas has sort of addressed being able to add additional context to their financial data kind of through our open performance application. Pierce is actually another customer of ours who's really done a lot with open performance, or our open performance application, where similarly they've tied their strategic initiatives. They've got 3 vibrant communities, entrepreneurial climate, and effective government, to different KPIs that they have their different departments keep track of and measure. So if I actually open up the Human Services Department over here in another tab, Human Services is in charge of this page, and they've got KPIs measuring kind of different things that they're interested in to help understand at a high level, at a glance, how they're doing as a city, as a county for these key measures. Now, the reason why we want to talk about open performance in particular was, I think Stephen mentioned you were interested in tying kind of these key performance indicators to our performance to financial information. And that's something that Pierce has done, I think, especially well through, again, use of our perspectives pages, where they have kind of highlighted and tied in financial information for the CARES Act to specific KPIs. So again, all of this is just kind of customizable dashboards, narratives that you can drag and drop to create these types of informational web pages for the public to view. So I'll just kind of scroll down. You can see they've got information on how they've allocated money towards COVID-19 testing. And then, of course, they're kind of measuring how much they've spent, the number of tests that they've had per day, and then the percent of positive cases per week. And all of this is kind of repeated through different categories of their spend and the KPIs that they want to measure to make sure that their spend is really effective. Now, the way that these...
Yes,
go ahead.
Caroline, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say that I think this is absolutely brilliant. It's fantastic. The first part that I saw will tie in beautifully with our work on the HACS committee for our social services matrix of what's available and filling the gap. So anyway, I think this is super exciting as an opportunity for us as a city.
Perfect. Yeah. Any other comments?
Here.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, we looked at this just briefly in the finance committee, and this open performance portal was not one of the things that we'd identified in our budget ordinance as something that we wanted to pursue, but it sure lit my eyes up when I saw it, especially because, we have levels of service set in our comprehensive plan that really we need to be achieving. And we need to be tracking our progress towards achieving those and identifying where we dip down. I think that this module doesn't, maybe doesn't make sense to deploy immediately because it's such an effort to, besides our levels of service that are set in a comp plan, to set up these key performance indicators and like move to a system of performance management this way. But still, it's great to know that this is out there. And we looked at a couple of other communities that have really, even really simple ones like how many audit findings did you get last year? And our goal is 0. And we check the box, so we could do that more simply, but it also might be worthwhile taking a more holistic approach and setting up all of these indicators first and then rolling this out. But still, it's really fantastic stuff. And I mean, how many council members, myself included, can say, how many calls the police department got last year, last month, and being able to track that information would be so powerful to understanding where our resources are and how much we ought to be spending on various things and how it changes over time. I hope my excitement is being conveyed even over Zoom here.
We see it. We see it.
Yeah, Councilmember Walters, couldn't agree more, obviously. And I would just say that we're flexible in the way that this is both consumed, adopted, rolled out, whatever. We can be flexible on the business side of that. But yeah, it's implementing a performance program is very powerful. Melissa and I and Kyle just went through one in the city of Stockton, and they are effectively tying City Manager Black's strategic objectives all the way through the departments within all the cities now. That implementation total process 6 to 8 months, but again, they started the wheels turning, if you will, and getting the performance management KPIs, objectives, sort of the culture in place first, and then rolled it out. So, but yeah, you're right, very powerful.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young.
Yes, Mr. Walters, I will add that I've noticed your excitement on this, and that's very good. And I love the idea of what this could potentially bring forward by way of open records and just transparency. I really do like that. I do have a couple of questions. My background is I worked very closely with, all 3 of the hospitals in our local area at one point. And so I guess my question is more when I looked at the potential budget impact, and the question I really do have is what I'd like to see in order to really get me as excited as Mr. Walters is that thoughts of, additional savings, and whether that means in staff time, whether that means in, we think that the utility for staff and citizens, what some of those are, just a little bit more of a meat on that. And then also, in this potentially up to $80,000 for the first year cost, does that mean that additional trainings, which mean we will need to bring staff up to par so that they are just as efficient as we may need it to be? Are there costs for that? And, just additional assistance. Most times I find that it is not included in the initial cost. And so what it would mean for me is evaluating the total cost and deciding if that is a great use of funds. Initially, I like it, but those are the things that I really want to consider. Who does updates, whether that's, how does that work?
Yeah, so this is Brett, Councilmember Young, and appreciate the questions, comments. So let me take a hack at that. So 2 parts to that question. First, I believe was sort of, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but related to return on investment, right? So what is the city potentially going to get back? We have hundreds of customers who have done analysis on this topic. The most, I want to say one of the best that I've seen in a long time was Chief Data Officer Ed Kelly out of the state of Texas. And he really broke this down. He really broke this down in terms of what does it cost and this, granted, it's not state, granted, it's Texas, it's Anacortes, I get all that. But if we can draw some parallels and some similarities to staff member, fully loaded cost of that staff member in 100K or whatever per year, I can send you the data, Councilmember Young. Broke it down to about 3 hours it takes to respond to a public information request in the state of Texas. Breaks down to about $66 per year. And so for them, it was the $250 per request times the number of requests that they're doing. And so that's one way of looking at it, is what is the staff time? Who are the people that are doing it? What are the departments that were impacted? And then multiply that times the numbers, the cost. Nothing super profound, but that's one way we see people, I want to say, justify or validate the cost that we, the sort of the cost of the software, if you will.
I totally hear you on that, and I get that, and I think that that's a very fair question. Yeah. And I think my push was a little bit more toward the cost-benefit analysis from the standpoint of Anacortes, meaning like Steve and his team of people, and also, just the thought of how we would use it, how it could save us time when we look at the cost associated with it in its continual form, and in what we're getting for it. And that's not a judgment call right now. I'm just curious about that additional data that I think will be important for us to make this determination, because I'm assuming that there's a yearly cost associated with, and I'm also, tell me if I'm wrong, assuming that there are additional costs beyond just the cost of the modules. There's training costs associated with it, your staff time, whether that's, any of your staff, and working with our staff to make sure that we have things updated and in a usable fashion. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of overarching look I'd like to look at. I agree with you. I think that this is something very beneficial, but those additional data points are something that I would really like to have before making a final decision about whether or not this is a great utility for the city. Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, and I think it's probably fair to let Steve answer the first part of that question, right? Was that not directed at the finance team, council member? But as far as the package goes, we try to make it easy, right? I mentioned earlier that Tyler is 100% public sector. So all that we do, we try to build our software to be consumed by members of cities, counties, states. So, and we focus on usability. And that follows through into our pricing and our packaging as well. And so the way that this works and the way that we've proposed it to Steve and the finance team and the city indirectly, there's going to be an annual cost for the software. This is all part of the 80K that's on the agenda tonight. We've also included in that number first year services. So there's not going to be anything beyond what you're seeing in front of you today. That was a high water mark, and we took that approach by choice. It's always easy to go down and very difficult to go up. And so it's not going to be any more than that on from a first year perspective. From a second year perspective, it's just going to be the recurrent cost of the software. Let's say we landed on 40K. It's going to be 40K per year for the city to adopt these applications on an ongoing basis. And that can be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. We sign multiple, typically we sign 1 to 5 year contracts. So whatever the city would want to do, we're willing to do that. But there really shouldn't be any other, I want to say, hidden costs. The software, again, is very usable, very implementable. And by the time that we leave and our global services team leave, we expect you folks to have to sort of be able to fish, if you will, if I can borrow
I totally hear you on that, and I appreciate that analogy. I just wanted to make sure that I know this may be sooner, this may be a little bit early in our discussion, but when we're looking at this cost, I guess my question is more about for Steve to come up, or one of your staff to come up and make sure that we have populated the spaces we wanted to. We've got in the built-in formulations to derive each of these things. We've put in, the labeling that we need in place. Will your staff work with our staff such that we're clear about, how to do this until we get better at it? Is that part of the cost, or is that additional cost? That's what I was getting to.
Sorry, I'm probably stepping on Steve's toes a little bit. Sorry, Steve, but it's part of the cost, Councilmember. Included. Yep. All right.
Mayor Gear.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, and I completely agree with both Mr. Walters and Mr. Young. I'm excited about something like this, but also we have, we're not the size of, I think you used Sacramento as one example, LA as another example. $80,000 is a big hit for us. So, but I see lots of opportunities to save staff time. I really think some of us on council, probably the mayor, spent a little more time talking to Mr. Hoagland about what he thinks some of those staff time savings are versus how many modules that we would end up choosing. You know, like this final module that's on the screen. Yeah, great in the future, but I don't see it up front. So kind of need to, we kind of need to work it down to probably where it's going to be in the mayor's authority kind of contract, but also very interested in that cost benefit analysis of staff time. I mean, I already see the staff time savings of rather than me calling up Steve and saying, hey, what's the number for, XYZ on the budget? I'm not bothering him. I can go to a tool like this and pull it myself easily. So I see the numbers there, but we just need to drill down a little more on the numbers.
So I'd like to comment. First of all, I think they don't charge us what they charge LA. I'm sure they pay more. But for me, I look at this as a tool as the mayor and for the staff and for the council. I think it would be transformative. We would have at our fingertips information we've never had, in real time. And I think as we move forward and you build programs in the budget for next year, we really understand what our true costs of things are. That it's amazing to me. So I know we've got to justify it and we have to figure out how to pay for it. But I think it would be, it would be lightning years ahead of where we've been, and it would give us a tool that we've never had, and you as a council can make some really incredible decisions that with really good data that I think we give you good data, but not in this format and not in the detail that this can show us. So this is awesome. I'm just blown away.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Mr. Young.
Just one last point about it. I appreciated you weighing in on this. That was very important and also insightful in a way because, I just think it was important to hear that from you and also Mr. Walters' excitement and everybody else's. So that really does matter. And I thought that was important to make note of because it did move me forward. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here.
Okay, so yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I assume that we could work on the finance committee with Mr. Hoagland and drill down a little further into which modules we might want to pursue and what pricing might we find acceptable. There are cities like Camas and Port Angeles that are pretty close to our size that have invested in this software. So assumedly they're getting it for prices that are similar to what we would be willing to pay. So we can do some more investigation that way. I definitely think that this open performance module would be a future phase because those KPIs should be set in a considered and collaborative way with staff and departments and probably through some council retreat as well. But the open budget and open expenditures modules by themselves, I mean, I just think about doing the budget next year with that at our fingertips. I mean, that's pretty huge. I did have another question related to that, and that was whether Socrata or Tyler offers some kind of budget software for developing new budgets. In the past, I've used Adaptive Insights, which was just grafted on to another financial software. I could see that being very useful, some kind of software being very useful to generate the next budget as well as report on the existing one.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Councilmember. So for the Socrata group in particular, that budget compilation part is not one that we work on. As part of the larger Tyler product family, which is the system that provides your core financial management system, there are budget builder tools that are both associated with your as well as some slightly more powerful ones associated with some of the slightly larger systems there. So that's not that preparation part is not as much one that we would do through this software, but there certainly are other options, through the same folks that are providing your ERP, if that's something that we'd like to talk through. I will say in that budget process, one thing that we do see people do very often is load their proposed budget into this application.
Oh.
So one of the features of that open budget application is, for example, in your current fiscal year, it's showing your budget versus actuals. You can also configure a future fiscal year that has a budget with no actuals. So you can actually share out that proposed budget to your community before it's actually approved. And actually go through that same process of that sort of interactive drill down and visualization. So that is something we see folks do as part of their budget process that's helpful to understand some of those nuances. But in terms of budget prep, it would be a different group in Tyler, but certainly someone we're happy to connect you with.
Thank you.
Okay, well, great presentation. Do you have anything else to show us tonight, Melissa? No.
Nope, that was it. Yeah.
Council, other questions, or we'll take us back to the finance committee and start talking about it internally. Really exciting stuff, and I thank you all for being here from the Tyler team, and thanks Steve from finance for putting this together. Definitely something that we've been looking forward to looking at. Okay, so at this time, based on no other comments, we're going to move on then to the next item on our agenda. Thank you all. And we're going to go to item 6B. This is open for public comment. This is resolution 3024. We're asking for authorization of hiring 2 half-time library assistants. This is an action item. And Mr. Hoagland, are you leading this discussion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So the next 2 items are both related to staffing levels. So the first item, resolution 3024. Maybe I'll share my screen real quick. So this is the resolution that we're talking about, 3024, and it's to hire 2 additional half-time library assistants. So this goes back to our existing budget ordinance as well. So there's a section in our budget ordinance for the 2021 budget that continued the hiring freeze that was put in place for the COVID crisis. That hiring freeze continues, requiring approval by council for unfilled positions. So what these positions are, let me take another step back, kind of recapping where the library is at right now. When we went through the, what I kind of refer to as the COVID budget amendment last year, we trimmed about 1.6 million out of the budget to respond to the COVID crisis and the ensuing downturn in the economy. So at that point, there were a number, from that point on, there were a number of positions that became open at the library. Through the budget process last year, we actually cut 3 positions out of the budget library, and there is still 3 positions in the library budget that are unfilled. So this is 2 of those 3 unfilled positions. So as the library staff started working with the mayor and others in developing their plan to reopen the library once those timeframes are established, they recognized that the current staffing levels didn't really allow didn't allow the framework for that to happen. So so this resolution is requesting those 2 positions, and the basis of that, the library budget is primarily funded with property tax. What we saw through through last year, through the year where we saw drop-offs in some of the revenue streams, property tax remained about the same as it always has been, and that's over 99% collection of properties. So And then looking at the last several months, I think the last 4 months of sales tax, our sales tax revenues have actually either equaled or slightly exceeded what we collected in the prior year. So so those are both two of our primary general revenue streams that would support the property tax, supporting the library and other funds. And then the sales tax is a general revenue source that I wanted to point out appears to be relatively strong, which is important because at this time there doesn't appear to be a need to cut other levels of service to reallocate those resources back to the general fund. So that's why we're presenting this to you tonight. It's 2 half-time positions. The total budget, or the total expected expenditures, is something slightly less than $100,000, and we expect funding to be consistent for the year to be able to support this. So be happy to try and address any questions or concerns council may have about this.
I might note for the library, as they reopen, and they still have curbside service in place for quite a while, it takes twice as many staff to provide the same level of service to do it in a COVID-friendly manner. They'll also have to have a person greeting people at the door to keep the count number. So it's, Jeff and his staff have really drilled down on the exact positions, and we won't be able to open and provide the level of service that is also a COVID-friendly, safe space without these positions. So I just wanted to let you know that there's a lot of work's gone into this, and they have done really well with the doors closed, providing curbside, but to open the doors, this is what we need to do.
Mayor Gear?
Yes.
And yeah, I know you'll be surprised, but yes, I do support filling these positions.
I'm not surprised.
Well, it's the right thing to do. The biggest question I have is understanding where the library falls in the state's phase 2. Are we planning on opening to a 25% capacity, and if so, when?
Yeah, Jeff, I'll let Director Jeff Vogel address that.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Welcome, Mr. Vogel.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for the question. We are allowed to open at 25% capacity right now. We have been getting ready for it, and we are shooting for an early April opening. A lot, in that planning, that's where the need came out of it, is trying to figure out how we're going to do this, how we're going to maintain curbside, how we're going to do it safely, and so that is kind of contingent on whether we can get staffing in place by then.
Yeah, great, Jeff. Thank you. Because that wasn't really clear. I read your letter, which I know the rest of council did, but that makes it perfectly clear where you're going with the staffing. Makes perfect sense to me that we need to add this staffing for you.
Thank you.
Mayor Gear?
Mr. Young.
Sitting on the library committee, Mr. Vogel, as well as his team, has made it very clear how hard they're working in order to maintain services for the city. As seamless as can possibly be done given COVID, but at the same time, like I think you've pointed out as well as others, people are still using the service to drive up, checking up books. You just cannot just grab a book and put it back. It has to sort of quarantine for a little bit. And so it's a whole process that we as public may not be as clear that's taking place. So I'm very much in support of moving forward this resolution.
Okay, is there any member of the public that would like to comment? I don't see any hands up. Okay, council, additional conversation.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Walters.
So the only thing that makes me nervous about this is that there were a number of positions in the last budget that were unfilled and are subject to the hiring freeze that we imposed in the budget. This is the only one that's coming forward that doesn't, at this time, that doesn't require the budget amendment. What about the others?
Mr.
are
Hoagland,
they
you
gonna
want
miss
to bring, I'll let Steve address that.
Right, so these two positions, as you point out, these two positions were included in the budget and required council approval, but since they are already budgeted before, we don't need to adjust the expected expenditure budget. So this is just to get approval to hire. The other positions that we'll talk about after this are not included in the budget, so do require an amendment to increase the expenditure level. And that's, so that request is in a budget amendment ordinance.
Right. So I definitely appreciate that both these positions that only require resolution, only require the nod from council to hire, no new budget authority. I appreciate that these are on the agenda at the same time as the ones that do require new budget authority. But then there's also other positions, right, that are budgeted but are subject to the hiring freeze. What happens when they show up next week and they also, you know, want to be approved? My comment on the next agenda item as well is that we should just be looking at all of these things holistically and simultaneously so that we can make sure to prioritize and so that the money we do have available goes to our top priorities.
So, Mr. Walters, I agree. I think the thinking was the directors were trying to be respectful of the freeze and only ask as needed, as you know, their needs in their departments changed. Now you're bringing a different perspective, but I think that was their perspective moving forward. They didn't want to ask until they needed it.
Well, I think that's valid too. Do I assume that this would be effective immediately and library would seek to hire immediately?
Yes, because we're going for opening sometime in April and we need extra people to be able to do that in a COVID safe way.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable with the way staff has presented it to you, Mayor, as needed. And that's why I asked the question. You know, we're doing curbside service. Granted, it's hard, but it's very easy to go to the public and say, hey, we need to bring on these 2 budgeted halftime library assistants because we're going to try to get things almost back to normal with a 25% capacity. I mean, that's a real need. There's a real timeline there. That's a great way to present it. And then I think we have the same thing with the next item on the agenda. So I'm okay not looking at all of the frozen positions every time. I'm counting on the staff bringing those to you, Mayor, as they see needed, as we start to try to get back to normal.
I'm also open to hearing if, you know, after we get through this, if we want to do another way down the road, we can do that too. So was it you, Ms. Moulton?
It was, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I agree with Mr. Miller, and the library has done a fantastic job during COVID with all the constraints upon them reaching the public with their programs, the curbside service. It's been invaluable to our community over the year. And with the reopening coming up, this is absolutely necessary for our level of service to increase, as this community resource is so important to so many of us. So with that, I move to adopt Resolution 3024, authorizing the hiring of 2 library assistants.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Mr. Young. Is there any more discussion? Ms. Hunt, would you take the vote?
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, the final item this evening is item 6C, also open for public comment. This is ordinance 3086, amending the 2021 budget to add staff positions. Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me jump over to the ordinance real quick. I'll highlight the section of ordinance that has the matrix that shows the positions we're asking for and the associated impact to the budget. Before we get into this, I did want to point out one other thing that's being identified here in the ordinance. It's in one of the whereases up here. This one right here, where it describes the staffing situation we went through when 2 of the road staff transferred over to the fiber department. And the timing was such that we felt it was prudent at that time not to refill or not to backfill those positions. So those 2 positions have been open for some time. One of them is fully funded by the utilities. So that one, the way per the budget ordinance, did not require council approval. The other one was partially funded by utilities and taxes. So the tax funded road position is what we're talking about here in this whereas. So what we are requesting here is not to hire a full-time position to fill that FTE, but to hire 2 temporary employees to cover that position. So they wouldn't be carried over into the following fiscal years. They'd be for this year only, and then reassess at the end of the year. But it's not, I wanted to explain that because it's not delineated in this matrix. So those 2 part-time positions, and those aren't fully tax funded, but they're partially tax funded, so they do need council approval. So these positions that are outlined here in the matrix, there's 2 water positions, and this is the estimated cost of those 2 positions, about $204,000 annually. And these would be fully funded out of the water utility, and and those would be staff dedicated to the water treatment plant. The second, or the next position is in the GIS department, and it would provide assistance to the existing GIS technician. And this position has a salary spread across multiple funds. So actually, just a small portion is actually tax funded because they work across all of the utilities as well. So that's how those positions are funded. That's how that position would be funded. And the same is quite true with this legal assistant. So the 4th position we're requesting 2 water, 1 GIS, and then 1 legal assistant. And that would also be a combination of utility and governmental funds spread to fund that position. So I thought it might be beneficial if you have questions. I believe we have the department heads on who might be able to speak directly to any questions you might have about these positions. We did provide some other material in the packet to try and illustrate what's driving the need for these positions.
Mayor Gare?
Mr. Walters.
The 2 water positions is that's something that we are doing in response to events not under our control.
Right.
The next 2 positions, I don't understand why they weren't considered as part of the budget that we adopted 2 months ago. Same method as before. We want to consider all of these things simultaneously, and I don't think that these needs are new. I also want to delve a little bit further into the GIS question, but some of them may just be emergent and we just need to deal with them. For example, the legal assistant position. Right. But still, we have to be considering these things. There needs to be a really high bar to considering an out of budget cycle staff. Right. And I'm wondering if we've met that with the GIS position. And I have a smaller question mark about the legal assistant position.
Okay, Mr. Buckamar, do you want to address the GIS position? Because I believe you did put some money in the budget for contract help for GIS.
Yes, thank you,
But
Mayor.
you've decided to do something different at this point. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, this is, I believe, the third year that we've tried to get a budget for some help in the GIS asset management. Previous to this, it didn't make it past the mayor's, and financial, the early stages of budget. So council never got to see that. This year we put in, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of in excess of $70,000 just for consulting help for Mr. Hoxie. And then as the financial picture started to maybe look a little better, we thought, gee, why not turn that $70,000 sometime mid-year into an FTE, and then next year add, call it $30,000 in addition to that, and then we could maintain that FTE for the long term. I've got another, if there needs to be some
a follow-up to that.
Okay.
I appreciate those considerations. Is this the right approach overall, though? If we need additional capacity in GIS, is it the right approach to add a dedicated GIS person? Or do we want a more multi-purpose position that can do other things, create more redundancy and more cross-training?
So I can answer that. That's a really good question. So this additional FTE is going to solve three problems. I can try to make it, and condense it into three problems that we're solving. So the first thing it's going to do is to add management level redundancy to both systems, to both the GIS, the mapping system, and to our asset management system. You take into consideration we have one person managing both of those systems right now. Rob Hoxie is both our mapping system manager and our asset management system manager. Most other cities with a system our size has at least two, and many of them have three people in that same capacity. So all of the maps, we've got over 20 maps that are publicly available, and all of the internal maps that are available are all being managed by one guy. In addition to, I think I just counted up over 25,000 assets that Public Works Rob is currently tracking. Each of those has multiple elements, 20 elements to it. So 20 times 25,000 is a whole lot of stuff that he's tracking. The second thing it's going to allow us to do is to use that Cartograph asset management program to its fullest. There's so much of that program that's untapped right now. The analytics, the predictions, the reports that it could produce, to tell us how much time's being spent, how much money we've expended, that kind of detail. It could be used to predict our maintenance needs, forecasting for budgets, prioritizing our budgets, everything from pavement to pumps to pipes could be better utilized than what we're doing now. It's also going to allow us to expand that program. We added the water plant last year, which was a huge undertaking. We added the fleet component, so all of our equipment is now in there. That was just the beginning of this year. We would like to add the wastewater plant. We would like to develop a seamless interface with the finance department so they can get the information they need without having to be generated every time they ask. And maybe arguably the most important, we would like to build a completely functional facilities component. That would allow us to forecast our maintenance needs, budget planning for our buildings. The museum roof is a really good example. Our roofs, they're in there, but we just don't have the bandwidth to start analyzing and prioritizing which facility, thing is necessary. Is it the roof? Is it the wiring? Is it plumbing? Is it carpet? And then we'd also like to develop a work order system for facilities. So every department head could say, hey, we need an ABC or a 1, 2, 3, and it would go into a work order system. Because right now it's a write-on, wipe-off board in Mac's office. I mean, I'm brutally honest. So that's what we think that extra FTE would do for us. Save us money, help us prioritize what little money we have.
So is it if I might summarize, it sounds like, you want to add this position, which will achieve redundancy. And it might not even be enough staff time to do what we need to do.
I'm not bold. I'm not that bold. I'm gonna start with just the one person, but the whole facilities thing, if we start a work order system in facilities, we've got 2 people in our facilities, staff. One of those is a working manager, and anyway, I'm gonna.
Well, some of that I assume is just prioritization. My concern was just that it be enough work for those 2 positions, that those positions be more or less evenly allocated so that they are real backups for each other.
And that's absolutely our intent. Right now, we've got one single focal point, one pinch point for all of that stuff.
Mayor Gear.
Mr. Miller.
Well, Mr. Buckemeyer, no, you don't sell yourself short. You've come in bolder with FTE requests earlier on. But again, kind of back to Mr. Walters' original point, I do share the concerns about, are you going to have something that is a bigger priority that we've left off the previous year's budget? I think you forgot the GIS and fiber piece. I think that's an important part, because I know certainly we've talked about it on fiber committee. I think the importance of entering that very valuable asset into our city GIS system is very important. And I don't think you really have the bandwidth to get that done right now. Yeah, I'm supportive of this. As long as you don't go back to the Fred that I know who does lay out all these extra ones to balance out the possibility that we'll say no. But to the cost of this, so I don't think I had a question in there, just saying that I'm getting behind this one. But the main reason I get behind it, thanks to Mr. Hoagland laying it out, is make sure the budget impact is I'm reading it correctly, because it makes sense that we would be able to charge a lot of this to the utilities. Is that correct? And so if that's accurate, I think that's a good way fiscally to manage this. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Buckemeyer, would there be some savings on overtime also?
Yeah, absolutely. Rob puts in a tremendous amount of overtime. I mean, Steve helped us out at the staff level and analyze that for us, and yeah, he works a lot of hours just to keep the system floating, right? Yeah, the data entry and whatnot.
Right. So any other questions up to that position? And then we could have Darcy maybe talk us through the contract specialist and our legal assistant. Welcome, Ms. Swetnam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. Yeah, I appreciate council considering this request, and I appreciate the mayor's support of this. Mr. Walters, you raised a good point about why this position wasn't in the budget for this year. This has been something that I think has been a long time coming, but with the uncertainty around the budget during COVID, the fact that there was a hiring freeze, our plan was to try to make do with the staffing that we have. And just to give you all a sense, since you probably don't have the entire city org chart memorized, I am the attorney in the legal department. We have a full-time legal assistant who supports the prosecutor, and she also does public records and claims management. We have Miss Hunt, who is a part-time legal assistant for the legal department, and she oversees the Laserfish program. And then we have the contract specialist. So our plan was to use some of the executive assistant's time to help support and provide some redundancy on the contract specialist. And it just really hasn't played out to be something that's a workable solution. And unfortunately, with one contract specialist and then my already busy workload, we've found that there's a bit of a choke point. I have to say, you know, from my perspective, I think it's a good news story that since 2017 and the development and implementation of the contracting program, the program has grown so that, you know, we're using consistent city contracts. We're following good contracting practices. You know, legal is involved from procurement to management. We're doing checks on budgets. We're doing checks to make sure contracts are qualified. And this program touches half of the city's budget. So it's a significant portion of what the organization does. But we don't have redundancy there. And that's something I'm really concerned about. And so, you know, this position that we're asking for would support the contract specialist to get some cross training, help alleviate the backlog of contracts that are waiting in the queue right now to get prepared, and also provide some support for my workload as well. All of the other staff members in the legal department at this point have different discrete areas that they're in charge of. So I don't have a legal assistant. But again, the good news is that, you know, the good work that the city's doing, the fiber program, the expansion of some of the public works programs, we've just gotten to the point where we've outgrown the staffing levels that we have. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the specifics. But I think you all got a copy of the memo that I gave Steve and the mayor that has some of the data points about, you know, what the program has done over the past few years.
Mayor Gear?
Yes, Mr. Hogan.
One thing that I would say, and a couple times this has already been mentioned, but when we were going through the budget process, you know, 6 or 8 months ago, things look radically different than they do now. You know, unemployment now is nearly 6%. It peaked at 14%. So I feel much more comfortable with bringing on these two positions now than I did when we were discussing the possibility for last year when we were developing the budget. Yeah, things look, I guess I hesitate to say we've turned the corner, but things look much brighter, and there's, you know, there seems to be good news in front of us.
Mayor Gear?
Ms. Moulton.
Ms. Swetnam, thank you for your presentation and also for your memo. It's really helpful to see in print all the things that the city attorney's office is responsible for. I think this is great information for us to have. And Mr. Hoagland, thank you for your support of funding these positions. Means a lot. So I don't know if there's further comment or not, but I think that there's a motion here somewhere that I can make. And I move to adopt ordinance 3086, authorizing the budget amendment to add 4 FTEs to the 2021 budget.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Mr. McDougall. Is there any additional questions or comments? Ms. Hunt, would you call for the vote?
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Great discussion, and thank you for your vote of confidence. We need the help. And I have one final thing, more of an announcement. Our city landline have been down since this afternoon. The phone company went home about an hour ago, and they'll return at 7 a.m. We can be reached by cell and online, but landlines at this point are not working. So we hope to have that up and running by morning. Okay, so with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Have a lovely evening, and we'll see y'all really soon. Good night.